a quick revision on yesterday. We're doing the grunge movement, and yesterday was mostly about the history of grunge and the origins of grunge and how grunge started. So, just as a recap, if you had to put grunge or the grunge style in one short word, what would you say? Or let's say a sentence, or how would you describe it? Let's just start. Say, what would you say is grunge?
It's gothic, almost like messy.
Sorry, messy? Yeah, it's not gothic, eh? Because gothic is very distinct. Okay, but it's messy. What do you?
Sounds very
raw. Okay. What are the words we used yesterday? You used the word raw.
Yeah.
Gritty. I used another word like gritty. I used the word gritty. What other word did I use?
Can you say aggressive?
Aggressive. So aggressive.
Energetic. Yeah.
Aggressive. Yes. Energy. Energy. Part of aggressiveness, you can say, is it's no rules. You know, a person with no rules. There's no rules to grunge. There's no rules. Energy, it's energy, and part of energy appeals to emotion. So when I think of energy, I think of it appeals to emotion. There's no rules. It could be intuitive. Intuitive. You just do it because I feel like it. It feels right. Now, I like this thing about it feels right, because if you've got an experience in anything that you've done for a long time, you get a feel for it. Okay? So whatever you like, if you like music, you get a feel for music. If you like cars, you get a feel for cars. Then you can see a car and you just say, I'm going to do this because it feels right, or I'm going to do that because it feels right. You don't analyze it. Like we in graphic design analyze form, we analyze color. He doesn't analyze everything, it just feels right. And if it feels right for you, and it feels right for a number of people as well, then you've got a group. Right, then we've got a group and it all feels right, and you can talk about why it feels right and whatever, or it's breaking the rules or whatever, and then as long as you can get income from it. So who was in graphic design, who was the father or the inventor, and he's still today alive, who is the number one? There's a few. David Carson, but there's a few, but he is the number one, David Carson. So, if you look at David Carson and you look at all of his work, guess what? You're going to get a feel. You're going to intuitively feel, that's a David Carson. Because you're going to start seeing patterns in his work. And we get patterns that we see in people's work, and in grunge there's a pattern, and then you intuitively know, okay, this is grunge. Now, I'm going to start analyzing it for you today. So I'm going to say, this is grunge, and I'm going to keep it simple. I'm not going to do all these fancy words like messy, raw, gritty, energy, emotional. I'm just going to say, grunge equals texture. Because in a way, texture is an overall word that can describe grunge. Because if you look at the lettering of grunge, it looks like sometimes it's torn, sometimes there are elements missing, sometimes it looks like raw, messy. It means there's brush strokes, there's no order. So it tends to look like texture. You agree? Yeah. So texture can take many forms. A brush stroke could be a texture. You can do in Photoshop a brush stroke, right? And then it's a texture. Because yeah. Or which type fonts can lends itself to texture? A sans serif font or a script font? Which one mostly? Script. Because even though David Carson doesn't ever use script, I hardly see him use script, but script can have the effect of a brush stroke. You know what I'm saying? It can look messy. Script can look messy. So I'm just saying to you that as long as there's texture, I want you to think in grunge in terms of texture primarily, most importantly. But it doesn't have to be. But when it comes to backgrounds, when it comes to when it comes to backgrounds, when it comes to, let's say you got text. So in other words, when it comes to fills, the fills of a text, that could be grainy, then it becomes textured. But now when you talk about the texture of the text, and that text is like eaten out here a bit, like a brick, or like brickwork that looks textured, then that is also part of the texture. That's now the edge. The edge is textured, here the fill is textured. So whether you apply texture to the fill or to the edge, it doesn't matter. Texture is the key thing. Okay, so I'm going to keep it very simple for you today by looking at comparing traditional classic layout versus grunge layout. So let me quickly do that for you. So when you look at a magazine layout or an article, there is a heading, there's a subheading, and then there's body text, like a brochure. You agree? A brochure, you're always looking for the heading, the subheading, and then the body text, the column of text. So columns of text you usually find in magazines and in brochures, right? But you don't really find it in adverts, am I right? Adverts tend to be not body text, columns of text. They don't want to give a lot of information. They want to put a price, they want to give a headline, they want to attract you with a picture, they want to sell something, they want to brand the product. They want to make sure that you know what the product is. So I'm just going to look at, for the moment now, in today's class, looking at it, I'm just going to look at the headline and the subheading. Not so much the body. If you have a bit of body, that's fine. That's what I'm going to be looking at. Right. So if you look at a headline, so a headline has usually got 3 words or 4 words. Headlines are not very long. It's usually the subheader that explains the headline. You agree? The subheading explains the headline. So, if you, sorry Colin, does it take the whole board?
Yes.
Okay. All right, so let's say we've got a headline inspired by Carson. Inspired by Carson. Right, that's my headline. And can you see, I want you just to read it, so I put it nice in caps and nice and neat. So almost classic. Alright, so now if you say inspired by Carson and you're doing a classic design, you've got a layout and it's going to be top, middle, top. Then the most, by is a very unimportant word, like A and by is a very unimportant word. So you might have something like inspired by Carson. So it's very centered. Look at the alignment. It's centered. There's symmetry, and it's easy readable. And the fonts are the same size. Nothing fancy. That is typical classic layout design. Now with Carson, let's look at our heading. So number one, the first thing I want you to think of is he takes the spacing, he affects the spacing, he looks at the letter spacing. So the letter spacing is affected. Most of Carson's work, you will see, if you look at his designs, and I'm assuming now you've seen his work now, would you agree that he has letter spacing, and the letter spacing is random? It's not like classical letter spacing. Classical letter spacing says it's got to be equal letter spacing between the letters. Right, that's classic. But when it comes to Carson, what he'll do is he'll say, there's the letter spacing, and now you'd think the classical spacing would be equal spacing. And then what he does is he just says, okay, let's bring this closer together. And let's put this far away. Shucks, now you can hardly even read it. But this letter spacing is typical Carson because it's wide there and less wide there, and it's not equally wide. So if I do letter spacing like that, even if I do my font in a very traditional font and I change the spacing, immediately I think of Carson, Grunge. Now I'm going to ask myself, and I'm going to ask you as well, do I tend to think of classic? Do I think of grunge or Carson, or do I think of pop? So what does pop do with spacing? In pop, and I don't want to compare pop yet until we do pop, but spacing is not a big deal in pop. In pop art, what's more a big deal is how you can take every letter and make it a shadow and make it different. And it's more to do with the effect to a headline than the spacing of a headline. That's pop, and the colors, and does it stand out. So a typical pop, just to compare to it, while we're busy comparing, the eye will be an eye, and it will have maybe an outline, and it will have a pattern fill, and it will have a shadow and effects. There will be so many effects to that one letter: shadows, outlines, gradients. The poor eye is dominated with effects. Whereas if you take now Carson and we look at spacing, spacing plays an important part. And even if you look at all Carson's work, texture plays an important part. You won't really see a Carson work without texture and without the use of space and spacing. So where he places it, there is quite a lot of white space. And he uses white as a space. Sometimes he doesn't. Sometimes he just uses color as a space. And that is why I'll even show you my favorite Carson works, is the ones where he just uses a broad band of color, and it's just got a bit of texture at the end. And that's all it is. It's just a band of color, and then how he places the rest around it. Okay, but white space and space is important. But let's talk about fonts and headings. Let's talk about headings first. That's the first thing you look at, is the way the space is. Okay, let's look at another. Let's talk about another one. Okay, the fonts vary. Not only does the spacing vary, but the fonts vary. Meaning, in traditional graphic designs, you always hear them say, go onto the YouTube, everywhere, never use more than 2 fonts in a headline and a tagline or in a design. Always stick to one font and an alternative font and make sure that they are related in some way. Okay? That they don't clash. So you can use the designers will all tell you in classic design, only use one font. But if you use 2 fonts, then make sure that the 2 fonts don't clash. Alright, and if you and Carson says, no, use any font you like, or any combination of font. So there could be a sans serif font together with a typical serif font, and there could be another font over there. It is not married to one, but you can use 3 or 4 fonts in a design. And then what he does is he tends to damage the fonts. Now when I say damage the fonts, I don't want to say the word damage the fonts. He's actually saying he's changing the fonts completely. He adds texture to the fonts, or he cuts the fonts, or he rips the fonts, or he puts half of the fonts. And then, so the way he uses it, and then he makes one letter large and one letter small. So let's just talk about fonts. He combines serif and non-serif. So even if he has a serif, he'll cut off one of the legs of the serif. So he cuts off that leg of that serif. Or next to that serif, he'll put a non-serif font. It doesn't matter. Or he'll put a totally different font. Or what he'll do is, if he's chosen a font, he might say, okay, why must it continue being thick? Let's make it thin there. So he just distorts the font. He cuts parts of the font off. So when you look at a certain font, he's never married to any particular font. Look across his works and you'll see different fonts. The only thing I'll say in terms of looking at when I look at grunge is, he doesn't tend to use scripty fonts. He doesn't. He uses scribbles, yes, and he does use sometimes fonts that are rounded corners, yeah, that look scripty because they've got rounded corners. But the majority, and I'm talking about 80% of his work that you look at, tends to be non-serif and serif combined. Serif and non-serif combined. But somehow the text has been distorted, scratched, played with. Text is never neat and clear as in advertising. You look at ads, it's always nice and clear and neat. You will distort it. So there's no rules. I've even seen him taking the letter E and putting the E facing that way. Doesn't matter. Carson will turn an E and face it the wrong way. He'll stretch it. He'll put half of the word on another line. So if you have the word inspired, he'll just put the word ins and he'll put inspired somewhere else. He doesn't care how he breaks the word. He'll just realize because it's a heading and because there's a few words, you figure out it says inspired, even if he breaks it. So if I want you now to know about headings in Carson, look at the spacing and look at the different fonts. So when I say look at different fonts, I mean combine sans and non-sans. Serifs and non-serifs combine it. So if you got the word inspired, so let's say the word Carson, then put one as a serif, put the next one as, and it applies to upper and lower case as well. Put one as maybe a lowercase. Alright, this is a non-serif. Then you've got the R. Okay, am I going to use the R? Okay, let's do a capital letter R, non-serif. And let's do a capital letter S, but let's do it serif. And let's do an O, normal, as a non-serif. So it's all lined up, like as if it's going to be classical. And then you just do an uppercase N, a lowercase n. So the lowercase n looks like it's all lined up to be caps. So it's caps, only one lowercase, the rest is uppercase. But now he's mixed caps, non-caps, serif, non-serif. Now that is grunge. So if you want to describe to me grunge in terms of a heading, doing a combination of upper and lowercase, doing a combination of serif, non-serif, and that's one part. Let's now combine it with his spacing one that we talked about. So remember, here I talked about spacing, and here I'm talking about font combinations. Font combo. Combo. It's like when you go to the Spur and you want a combo. They give you surf and turf, fish and beef, or beef and chicken. Hey? I want a combo. I don't just want beef, chicken or beef. No, chicken and beef. So guys, you want a burger? Do you want a cheeseburger? Or do you want a chicken burger? Or do you want a beef burger? No man, give me chicken and beef. I'm grunge, I'm aggressive, I don't have rules. Must I have both? Must I have one or the other? Then I want both. No, sir, we've got a combo. You can have both. No, then I don't want a combo. Then I just want the chicken. Or, no, sorry, make it a beef. That's grunge. Now I'm being grunge. So it's like you're individual. You don't care what people think. And then if you got your supporters or your gang with you, then the guy says, come on, give him chicken. No, come on, give him beef. What I'm saying is, so in other words, grunge is a movement. They've got people that love grunge, that love the movement. So every movement, you have followers. And then you get the people out there that also wants to be like them. But they can't be like them because they're not genuinely authentic like them. They're not really people that break the rules. They're not really aggressive by nature. They just want to act aggressive or act like I'm breaking the rules. Okay? And the typical example is, like I said yesterday, the one with cut-off jeans. They had cut-off jeans because they couldn't afford jeans and they wore their jeans. Grunge people wore their jeans the whole year, so we're going to get cut off and broken, and it's just normal. But now I want to be grunge, so I must cut my jeans, my brand new jeans, because I also want to look grunge and cut off. You see, so, okay. I'm not blaming those people that tries to be, but it's like they're not authentic. You've got to be, grunge is true to grunge. Grunge is true to themselves. So you got to own grunge, or you got to own. But classic, anybody can be classic. You can hide behind classic, but you can't hide behind grunge. Okay, so, and that is why grunge but then why doesn't everybody follow grunge? Why does everybody follow classic? Because classic is safe. Classic communicates the message. Classic makes it clear for 100 people to understand. It says, inspired by Carson. But if I start doing funny things to the space, everybody's going to sit and wonder and not understand, and this one's going to have a question. But it's okay for Carson to do that, because the longer you stay looking at that piece of work, and he sits there on the sideline and saying, look, you're staring at my poster now for half an hour. I'm happy because now it's being noticed. You're trying to understand it. But if these classic ones, you just walk past on posters like that. So even with the movies, it's the same with the movies. Posters tend to be the same in movies, so they don't catch my attention. Unless a movie poster looks different, will it catch my attention. But just talk about movies. There's so many effects and so many things to movies that everybody tries to climb onto the bandwagon. Now, everybody climbed onto the grunge bandwagon, and I'm not saying that you should do it, but I want you to use elements of it and turn it into classic design. How can I use that spacing and still add it into classic design and make it work? Because the key thing is you have to make it work. And one way you can make anything work is by just adding a 20% or a third. I'm deviating now because this is what makes any design work. I'm going to talk about the next one in a moment. I've talked about spacing. I've talked about font combinations. And even reversing fonts if you want to. Okay? But I just want to say what really makes something work, if you want to bring elements of something new into it. Don't just bring in one element. Let the design, let's have what I call the 80-20 principle. The 80-20. 20% can be the difference, but 80% must be the harmony, must be the classic, must be the 20% is the difference. So even in a design, when you're doing a classic design and you're making the overall color blue, right? And somebody gives you a picture that is very colorful, like it's got leaves in it, trees in it, all of it in it, so it's not a neutral color. Like we spoke about neutral colors being browns, it's neutral. But now he brings in a red in the picture or a green in the picture, and I'm doing my overall harmony of blue. Then just change the picture to a black and white, and immediately it'll fit in. And it'll still communicate the picture. Any picture that's a black and white is still communicating the message. It's just not, people expect it to be in color. But then you can bring in your blue or your red, and you can then bring in the harmony with your 80% of color. And then you bring in your 20% or separate color or your different color. But if you have a different color, like we checked the ads this morning, and they had only one totally different color, but it was only one part of the headline word that had a different color. It gave the headline, and one word was a different color. And that yellow was not repeated anywhere in the design. It's like, if you're going to be different there, I'm wanting to see, where's my friends? Where's my group? Where's my other yellow? Oh, there's a tone of yellow in the corner. Oh, thank heavens, it's not just yellow on its own. In the sea of blue, I've got a bit of yellow there as well. Oh, now I can feel. And as long as that 20% balance is fine, it's okay. You with me? Okay, so bring in Carson into your classic design. But don't just bring in one Carson element. Bring in 2 or 3 Carson elements that is noticeable, so that you will see that this design is not meant to be classic. And one way you can do it, in terms of the layout, is you off-center the text. So that's another key thing, is where things are not symmetrical. Things can be upside down. Text can be upside down. Text can be vertical. And they often say that the way to read a Carson magazine is like this. When you read a Carson magazine. Which magazine was he famous for? Raygun. Alright, so you read Raygun like this. You read it, you go to the next page. You read body. I want to read the body copy, so you turn it like that, you read it there. Oh, there's a subheading. Oh, I'm going to read it like this. Oh no, that one's upside down. Okay, I'm going to read it like this. You see,
To interact with
it's interacting with the magazine, so he puts things upside down, sometimes image upside down, sometimes a heading upside down, because he wants that interaction, he wants to break that rule, he wants to be different. So if your headings are upside down or not centered like a classic example, but your headings here right at the bottom on the footer, then let that be your heading, alright? So I'm wanting to say that in a typical Carson thing is when things are not symmetrical, because in classic style things are symmetrical. But so there's a so your heading or your headline doesn't show any alignment or symmetry. So headline, no symmetry. Okay, I can't spell symmetry, no alignment. So what I mean is, it's not important. Symmetry and alignment is not important. Okay, I know I've spelled it wrong, but I haven't got space. Okay, so it's not important. So it's where you place it on the layout. Where do you place your heading on the layout? If you place it not where it's expected, like next to the picture or in the middle top, but it's placed skew and maybe bleeding out. There's another thing. Headline can bleed or bleed out. He makes use of a lot of bleeding out. Then you know, that's grunge. The heading is bleeding out of the picture. It's not symmetrical. It's not aligned. It's off. And that is grunge. Okay, so that is to do with the headline. Another important thing about the headline, except that where it's placed, that it doesn't have to be symmetrical or placed, is that, and that it can be upside down or skew, is that is the size. Now, how can we call the heading size? How can we affect size to the heading? Okay, and then I'm going to talk about the body or the subheading. The main thing is size. You will see that in all artwork, we have the size of, like if I have here inspired, it'll be the same size. The text and the fonts will be the same size and the same font. But Carson tends to, even if, can you see, even that letter A and the N there, because it's lowercase, it's bigger than the rest. Because if it was not bigger, it was normal, then your font would have been like that. So it changes the size of your letters. It changes the size. And not only does he change the size, he changes the weight. So he'll do bold with light. He'll change it. Okay? So, so you'd have some, so if you have, say, inspired by, you could make the least important word big. And then he could size it larger or smaller. And he could misplace it so that it's not on the same line or spacing line. But it's size that differs. So your heading doesn't have to be the same size. The letters don't have to be the same size. The letters can be a different font and a different weight. But now don't overkill it. Because it's now, you can, there's no rules, overkill it. Use all these attributes in one headline. Why not? Go and use it all if you want to. Okay? But he's got a feel for his own text, for his own style. He knows when to not use it, when to use it, how to use it. So if you look at a ray gun magazine, even the word ray gun, guys, if you look at magazines, right, and you go and look at your car magazine, right, you're all familiar with car magazine in the shelves, right? It's got the same font, it's the same size, it's the same place. Wherever they put the name of the magazine, it's on the same position, the same size, the same font. It's always there. But you look at ray gun, then it's uppercase, then it's lowercase, then it's up there, then it's down there, then it's split, then it's not split. And that's the name of the magazine. But it tends to be bold enough for you to see it. That's the only key thing, that when you go watch through it, it's easily recognizable. The word ray gun dominates on the cover. But where it's placed and what font it is and how it looks, it's different all the time. You agree what I'm saying? So that's typical grunge, where no headline looks the same. Have you noticed when you do brand advertising, they use the same font and the same positioning in two different ads? So they might just put a different picture. Let's say we're doing the ad for that energy drink, Powerade. Now a normal ad will have maybe a picture of a woman, to show woman target market. The one would show in the gym of a man, to show the men are the target market as well. But where they place the font and where they place the heading is similar. Okay? Whereas not with Carson, he'll put in the one ad, he'll put the heading there, and the other heading he'll put it there, and then he'll change the font here, and every ad will look similar in the fact that it will have the grunge styles, the texture, the grittiness, the messiness, and everything will be there. And this placing of the way it uses fonts will be there. So not only is grunge distinguished by the pictures that they use, and what is the key thing that we spoke about yesterday about these pictures? If you talk about pictures in grunge, can you remember anything about a grunge picture?
Sometimes he puts his picture upside down.
Yeah, very seldom, but he does. The key thing about pictures with Carson is
Texture.
yeah, texture as well, but it's out of focus. He doesn't care about focus. He's not. Look, if you're a photographer, you better make sure everything is in focus. He doesn't care about focus or lighting or angle or.
Folded the picture.
Yeah, you fold the picture, or you'll take an angle of the picture, or you'll cut the picture. You'll cut your head off. He actually cuts one way. The head is not important. Cut it off. Let it bleed out, or just cut it off altogether. Or just show the eye part and the nose. Don't show everything. So he cuts off parts of the picture. So it's a way he crops.
Yeah.
We all crop. If I want a picture of Tracy, I'll crop all the background out to show Tracy in the frame. Comes Carson with grunge and he crops you. He'll crop half of your head out.
Yeah.
And he'll turn the picture skew. You see, that's grunge. Okay? So I want you to, mostly it's out of focus and you see something's going on there, but you're not quite sure. You see what I'm saying? And he can take pieces out of the pictures and use only pieces of the pictures and cut off the rest. He's selective of what the picture should be. But mostly it's blurry. And even text you can blur. He doesn't mind if you blur text. He doesn't even mind if you blur it into such extent that you can't even read the subheading. Okay? So why I'm saying this little thing about a picture is because just as well as you can recognize a Carson through texture by the way he uses pictures, it's also by the way he uses text. He doesn't place picture more important than text. His breaking of the rules of text is just as important as breaking the rules of pictures. And that's why I like it. Because the picture and the text are married. It's not like the one is looking totally different. And remember what I said to you in good design, is when the heading and the image can marry. Not when they're totally different, you know. Okay. Now let's talk about the subheading. I've spoken now to you about the heading, and this is the 4 things you can remember about the heading, and you can apply it. Okay, the way the spacing is used, the font combinations, the headlines, where it's placed, where the headline is placed, and the size of it, the different sizes of the different letters. So let's now talk about the subheading. So a subheading usually has 2 lines of copy. But if Carson wants because remember a subheading is usually how many words on average in a headline? About 5. 3 to 5 in a headline on average. How many words on average in a subheading?
1.
10 to 15. It's a subheading because it's got to describe the heading. I'm not talking about a tagline, eh? I'm talking about a subheading. Ads usually have subheadings just to add a little bit to what's being described, or a bit of copy that's displayed in the word. So there's just a bit of copy. So when I'm talking about copy, in traditional classic, you got your headline there in the middle. There's your headline, say one heading, inspired or whatever. And then the subheading is slightly beneath it because it's linked. And there might be 3 lines of copy or 2 lines of copy, of smaller copy. 2 lines of smaller copy or 3 lines of smaller copy. Now he doesn't deviate from it being smaller. He still makes subheadings look like subheadings. But again, he doesn't matter where he puts it or how he skews his lines. So you know with classical spacing of lines, we talk about, when you talk about letter spacing, you talk about interletter spacing, meaning the spacing between the letters, and you also talk about interline spacing. And in interline spacing, they call leading, right? The leading, your text leading means your interline spacing. It's called text leading. Interline spacing, it's equal. So the key thing that Carson that's immediately noticed about Carson is he's got a disregard for spacing, even interletter spacing. So the line spacing, if you look at the line spacing, it's not consistent. They can touch. 2 lines can touch or overlap. And you see it often in his work, that the 2 lines are touching each other, or they're overlapping each other that you can hardly read it. So this is a key thing of grunge, is the line spacing that touches. Even in some modern text today, you will find, even with modern adverts, they tend to sometimes let the 2 lines touch and then they think they are being very creative. But that's a Carson element that they brought in. Or they will put a 1 line in bold text and then the second line in thin text. And then it looks, you often see it, nice thick font and a thin line of text in the heading, and then it looks very nice and classic. To them it looks classic. But that is thick and thin together is a typical Carson grunge element. So they're moving towards grunge without being overbearing or without being noticeable. So I want you to be able to notice classic design and notice the elements of grunge intruding in the classic design. And if it intrudes 20%, you're going to have a good design. If it intrudes 5%, people are going to be bothered by it.
It's going to look like a mistake.
It's going to look like a mistake.
So
But if your alignment is off, but there's another problem at the bottom and another problem, and it's 20% a problem, then it's okay. But it mustn't be 60% all over the place and then 40% looking classic when the person is expecting something classic. You know what I'm saying?
It's going to be intentional.
Yes. So even texture can be incorporated in a classic design. But texture is not a classic design element. It is a grunge element. Good. So now we know how we can bring in grunge elements into design. But when it comes to the subheading things, it's when things touch that is important. And then the last thing is, not only does it touch or overlap, but it can also skew. There's 3 mistakes already. They're touching. They are overlapping. The one, so not only is that line touching with the top line, now it's starting to overlap that line. And now what's more important now is that one line is starting to be skew and overlap and skew. So it's like, my subheadings, you're ruining my subheading. And he doesn't care, as long as you can read it. And then he'll come back and he'll say, okay, I'll put the lines then reading up straight and that one skew. But as long as it's grouped together, it seems like a subheading. And then he can use it as a design element so that you think it's text. But it's not text, it's just there to be scribbles. It's just there to be a texture. So when you look closer and you say, I want to read that, what does that say? I can't read that, it's just scribbles. And then he turns it into a texture. He turns the subheading into a texture. So you can read the first heading, you can read the second line, you can read the third line, fourth line you can't read. Because he just made scribbles. He doesn't care if it's not meant to be read, it's a texture. You see, or it's totally out of focus, you can't read the text, it's totally out of focus. You see, so he plays around with the subheadings in terms of that. Okay? So what else does he do with subheading? So that's the one thing he does with the subheading, is He works on the line spacings and he changes it. He changes the line spacings in terms of the interline spacings, the in-between, the lines in between. He messes with the spacings of the lines in between. He puts it close, he overlaps it, he skews it, he plays around with the interline spacing. But what else does he do with the subheadings is he throws away the alignment. No alignment. He throws away the alignment. Now you know that in classic design, if you don't have proper alignment and proper symmetry, then they're gonna notice it and it's like a spelling mistake. Oh, it's a cardinal sin to have no symmetry or to have it not aligned. And we know what we want in graphic design, hey? It's got to be either aligned to the text is either going to be aligned to the left in classic design or to the centered. Type is going to be centered, or it's going to be aligned to the right. Nothing else. So if you're putting a subheading, it's okay if I align the subheading to the center. It's even okay if I align it to the left, but then it's got to be in line to the left of the heading, and it can be a bit smaller, but it's aligned to the left of the heading. That is allowed. But heaven forbid if you now don't have any alignment. So what do you mean by any alignment? Okay, so that's my string of text for the first line. This is my string of text for the second line. And this is my string of text for the third line. So there's no alignment. Some is pushed to the right, some is pushed to the left. You hear what I'm saying? You don't know if it's left aligned, right aligned, or centered. You don't know. And even when he does these magazines, and I'm not talking about body text here. You know, even if he does body text, heaven forbid in body text, if you're doing a magazine and you don't have a little spine of white space between the columns, he puts the columns right next to each other. And heaven forbid, if you're in my class and we're doing graphic art and you put your text right against the margin and you don't allow for a space on the edge of the picture for your text, we will say in graphic design, you can have your background bleed, your color bleed, your image bleed, but heaven forbid, don't let your text bleed. But he bleeds, he'll even bleed, he'll put it right against the margin so that it looks like it's bleeding. So he's got no regard for alignment. But you can still read it, it's still communicating. He's just being a bit of a rebel. He's just breaking the rules. Okay, so those are the key things. And even in your subheading, you might make 2 or 3 words bigger and then back to small again. Alright? Or you might just take one word and reverse the word. Put it black on white. Oh, sorry, white on black. Or black on white. Reverse it. Just to be off-centered. Okay, so there's a lot you can do, but I want you just to notice how he handles subheadings and how he handles headings. So what I want you to do in your project is we're going to put 20% Carson, but I want you now, when we're doing the design, and when we do tomorrow some more designs on Carson, we'll do 100% Carson, so that it looks like a Carson project or Carson design. But I just want to show you here my picks that I picked out. So this is now my pick for subheadings, and I think this is a perfect Carson one for the subheadings. In terms of, look at how he places the text, look at the line spacing, look at the alignment. Can you see the body text?
Oh, lovely.
You can still read it, but look how he places it. You see, it's not to the left, it's not to the right, it looks almost as if it's centered. But then if you look closer, no, the text isn't centered. Do you agree? It would look centered, but then suddenly you'll see it's not centered. And look where he places the text. It's to the bottom right. So, and then the Ives is suddenly big, as if the Ives is got to be a heading. It's got the feel of a heading, but it's not. You see, so that's a good one for me for the subheadings. And then a favorite Carson design is this one. I'll chat to you now about it. But this is my favorite one, and obviously he's self-promoting himself in this one, or promoting him as the leader of the course. And what you notice about it is that heading, like where you can have thin type, thick type, different fonts, small d, big D, and the subheading. Look how he overlaps the subheading that you can hardly read the subheading. So the word chaos becomes such a graphical element that he repeats it many times. Chaos, 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 and he's duplicating. So he duplicates some of the text. He puts the one word and he duplicates it and starts making it look blurred or out of focus. But you can see what it says. It says chaos and communicating. The subheading says chaos and communicating, and then repeats the word chaos as some design element. And this is what I meant about the top piece. He uses white space, but he just uses a grunge texture for the top. And then the other part of the magazine is just how he plays with the subheading, where the subheading is skew. And he makes those inverted commas as a quote, as a design element. Okay, and look how the number of the page, it bleeds out at the bottom and is huge. You got no doubt that is page 47. When there's a magazine, they just want to say that's page 47. They don't want you to look at it as page 47. It's not a design element. It's just, by the way, you're on page 47. Yeah, he says, well, I'm on page 47. You know what I'm saying? So he puts emphasis on things. He makes things unimportant or not important that is important or not important. Okay, so now I'm going to show you a typical design which I liked. And I immediately noticed the use of, in the heading and the subheading, or the heading, the use of grunge. But there's no texture. The only clue that is grunge dominated is the way they handled the heading. Told me this is grunge. Okay, so let me show it to you. And I showed you two ads because they're using this, because typically in classic they try to keep it similar. So first just look at it and then I'll focus into it. And we'll explain it. Okay? Would you say that heading is classical or grunge? Well, it's not totally grunge and it's not totally classic. So it's mostly classic. This is mostly a classic design with a touch of grunge element in it. You see, so no one can say that's a grunge design. But when you look at that design, you can't say it's a classic design either because of the heading. Because the heading is dominating, but the heading tends to be grunge dominated. So I'm just going to show the camera as well. And it says new Bose IE2 audio headphones. Okay, so it is describing audio headphones, and it's the new Bose IE2 audio headphones. Now classical design would have said, and look where it's been placed, it also tends to be lower. There's a lot of space on top. The use of space is also in the fact that it's not centered or equal spacing top and bottom, not equally aligned top and bottom. So a heading, usually we learn in spacing, when we do spacing of headings in classic design, we learn that the space there must be equal to the space there. So this should have been moved up in classic design. You agree? Right. So let's quickly just look at that little thing, that little design. So it says a new Bose IE audio headphones. So it is 1, 2, 3. So if I wanted to say this word, new Bose or Boss, I don't know why it's called Bose or Boss, I don't know, but okay, it's spelled, is that how I pronounce it, Tracy? Bose?
I'm not sure.
I'm not sure either.
Probably
okay.
Bose.
E2 audio headphones. So if somebody gives it to you as an art director and puts it on an email to you, and I say, look, I want you to do a design for me, right? I want you to do a design for me. Have a picture of a woman with headphones. Okay, because this is the new headphones that we've got, and put as a heading there, this wording, new Bose IE2 audio headphones. Then what you'll do is, if you're going to place it on this side, you're going to look at the width and the height, and you're going to try equal height there, but a bit of lifted up, slightly longer spacing there than there, and I'm going to put it in there, and then I'm going to decide, because a heading is 5 letters, this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, I'm going to put it in 2 lines. So how am I going to put it in 2 lines? Okay, so I'm going to put there new, so new might be slightly different, and then I'll put Bose IE2, and then call it audio headphone. Audio headphone. Because audio headphone is related, and that Bose IE2 seems to be the same size, and new I'll probably put it in a different color. And that's my heading. Classical heading, easy to read, new, different color, same fonts, all the same fonts. Headphones is easy to read, more or less same size, and there's my classical style. Yet they've brought a grunge element to it, and doesn't it make the ad a little bit nicer? Okay? So if you had to present to the client the normal and this, I'm pretty sure he would like this one. Because it's grunge but not overboard. But the guy knew about grunge, because grunge says you let your text touch, you let your lines don't have equal spacing, let it touch. As soon as it touches, we are in grunge. And look at the spacing, is those 4, and then now he puts it into 4 lines, not the classical 2 lines. He's putting 4 lines of text, no longer 2 lines of text. So he's almost treating it like a subheading. He's treating the subheading almost like a subheading. So now it's got 4 lines of text. Then it's different sizes. Can you see? There's different sizes. Bose is different to the size of new, is different to the size of headphones. There are 1, 2, 3 different sizes. Headphones are the same, audio headphones are the same sizes. IE is the biggest. Bose is big, like the IE, but then it's lowercase. And then the other one is also lowercase. So you see there's 3 different sizes of one. So that's also tending to be grunge. But it doesn't look overbearing. You know what I'm saying? It doesn't look overbearing. And then the alignment is wrong, because it's not centered aligned. It's pushed to the left, it's pushed to the right. Okay, and then it works. Now I see that this is not classical. So he's put in 20% different, making it different. But because he put 20% different, I'm lingering a little bit longer, just to make sure if I really like it or not. Now, they think, yeah, but it's not classical. Yeah, but I like it. But it's not classical. Oh, no, I like it. It's not classical. I like it. And then there's debate in your head. I like it. I don't know why. Give me reasons why. You see, we have these debates. We don't know. We subconsciously have debates. Sometimes we like a thing, we don't like it, and we don't know why. But then you you have a person that goes to buy clothes, and they just can't make up their mind. Well, this fit me. Well, that fit me. Then you get people go to a store, just grab a thing. There, buy, pay. It's because sometimes it feels good, or it doesn't feel good, and you can't say why. But then you tend to want to take it because it's different. You tend to want to take it because it's like it's the 20% that you're unsure of, but 80% you like it. Because you like the color, you like the rest of the balance, and it's not like all textured, all different fonts, and all different, you know what I'm saying? It's not overboard. It's just 20%. Guys, is there any questions? Because that's the lecture. That is text in grunge in a nutshell. Okay, thanks guys.